This morning's sermon title is We Didn't Start the Fire. This isn't the sermon I planned to do, by the way, no, not by a long shot, but I had, as always, Genesis 1 bouncing around in the back of my head. I don't think it will ever stop bouncing around in my head. And some things that Chuck said, talking about connecting with the next generation. And I've had a movie, it's also a book that's been stuck in my head as well, and all three just kind of collapsed in on my brain and meshed together. And so I thought I'd share some thoughts with you this morning. First, the story. There's a movie I saw years ago. By the way, it was like with VidAngel, that screening service, content filter service, so I can't tell you what it's like without that. So don't recommend it if you don't have that. But in this story, it focuses on this main guy. He's a sheriff of a small Texas town in the 1980s. And he's kind of like an Andy Griffith type. His dad was also a sheriff. His dad never carried a gun. And he's an old man by this point, and he is constantly confronted with just a changing world that he no longer feels like he fits in, and he struggles to really understand it. I mean, he talks about seeing kids with dyed hair or bones in their noses, and he's just signs and wonders, he says. And he also just, not only that, but now he's got issues like cartels and murders and things that he would never think he would see in his small town. And he just feels like he is utterly helpless to stop the darkness that is just constantly blooming in the world. And he doesn't know what to make of that. Now, if the good Lord is willing, I'll be 28 this month. Or as my wife says, I'll be 28 going on 80. That's what my wife says to me. Don't know how I feel about that. But even from a young age, that storyline, and that sheriff particularly, it always just, it moved me, and I identified with that feeling a lot. A feeling of wanting to save the world and feeling like, you just got a bucket on a sinking ship, and just no matter what you do, you're not making an effect, and you really feel powerless at times. But what I want to encourage you this morning, especially just thinking about like connecting with the next generation, and darkness and light and what God is doing in the world, I really want to share some thoughts, some things that I realized from Scripture that really speak to this struggle, at least to me. Because with that feeling, right, that feeling of being overwhelmed or carrying the light in a dark world, it can wear you down at times. But I want to first consider that it's not new, right? The struggle is not new. In fact, you can find that struggle between light and darkness on the very first page of your Bible. The first thing you run into on the very first page of your Bible is that age-old combat between light and darkness. So I want to first establish why I said we didn't start the fire, or why we didn't start the light, because first and foremost, God is the light. God is the source of light. In 1 John 1:5, it says, "This is the message we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." If you can believe it, my brothers are nerds. Shocker, I know. They're nerdy in different ways. But one of my brothers was trying to explain to me light and photons and wave particles. See, you lost me at particle. I don't know what you're talking about. But ultimately, really, scientists don't even understand what light is. Light itself is very, very mysterious. And I think it's so fitting with that mystery that God and his presence and his glory is constantly being connected to light or fire. And guess what fire is? You got it. A+, gold star. Fire is light. I mean, even Hebrews, it talks about he makes his angels, his ministers, a flame of fire. Right? Even those around his presence have this light endued with them. How does God appear before Moses in a burning bush? How does God lead the people out of Egypt? Over and over, even God's very angels almost always appear with this radiant light. And that's what God, it's a theophany. It's how God reveals himself. And it's always associated with light. And that didn't appear out of a vacuum, right? Because again, we find it on the very first page of our Bibles. In Genesis 1 and verse 1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep." Notice it doesn't say, "And God said, let there be darkness," does it? The default, there's just darkness, because guess what? Darkness is the absence of light. Without light, there's just darkness. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, God spoke. He said, let there be light. And there was light. All right, who's the source of the light? God. He's the source of the light. It says, and God separated the light from the darkness. God personally involves himself in that creative work, that creative function. So first and foremost, God is light. You with me? How are we doing? You good? Okay. All right. 2, we get to the concept of lesser lights. Here's what I mean. Look at this. So that was on day 1. We fast forward all the way to day 4. We're on day 4 now, all right? Day 4 says, and God said, let there be lights. Remember, the first one was singular. God said, let there be light. And then God says, let there be lights, plural, in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Let them be for signs, by the way. What is a sign? You see a speed limit sign. What is it doing? It's communicating a truth, right? It's pointing to something beyond itself, right? Something actionable, or the authority behind the one who sets that speed limit, right? By the law. So that sign represents the law, right? The power behind it. So the stars are just signs, right? They're just pointing to something else or someone else. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. So who did that first? God did, right? God separated the light from the dark. And then on day 4, God says, hey, let there be lights and let them separate. And look at verse 16. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule, to have dominion, to govern over. So now it's their prerogative. It's the stars. It's the heavenly body's prerogative. This is their domain. The day and the lesser lights to rule the night and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Who rules over the light and the darkness on the 4th day? God, yes, that would be correct. And what else? God gives rulership or governance to these lesser lights, right? The sun, the moon, and the stars. I want to put a side-by-side here so you get this picture. This dawned on me. I was like, oh my goodness. I read this my entire life. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. In verse 4, and God saw that the light was good. So was God being the source of the light? And look, and God separated the light from the darkness. What does that show? A personalness to it, right? God is directly involved in this light, in this separation. And how does he feel about it? He says, it's good. It's good that I'm doing this. This is a good light that I have made, and it's good that the light is separate from the darkness. And then in verse 17, it says, and God set them, right, the lesser lights, in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. Do you see how the yellow and the yellow match together? God separated. Now the lesser lights are separating. And how does God feel about these lesser lights that aren't as glorious as his light? They have this borrowed, right, this given rulership. And how does God feel about that? It's good. It's good. Kids, high school class, what do we say? Tov, right? This is tov. This is good. Hebrew word for good. It's tov. So God speaks light into existence and personally separates the light from the darkness. And God says, that's good. That's tov. Then God creates the light in the sky and gives them rulership over and task to separate the light from the dark. And he says that it's tov. That's good. All right, so what can we learn from that? Something very interesting within that idea. Does God need the sun, the moon, and the stars to give light? No, we've seen he's perfectly sufficient. It's good when he does it. Day 1, it's good. But he chooses to use them, right? He chooses to create something and give it a borrowed, right, brightness to carry on his task. And he says that's good. He's the source of the light, yet he gives created things the honor of bearing light and pushing back darkness. Okay. Do you see where maybe I'm going with this, by the way? Any clue? Okay. All right. This is where we get into the deeper concept of spiritual darkness and spiritual light. It's very tied in that very idea that without God, there's just darkness. There's no life. There's only death. And with God's way is life and light, but only when people operate and follow the ultimate source of light, being God himself. Now, this is what Israel's job was supposed to be. They were supposed to be a light to all the other nations, to show them, to demonstrate, to live out God's way. In other words, they were supposed to reflect God, just like the lesser lights. They're supposed to be a sign for the other peoples. Look at Deuteronomy 4:5. It says, "See, I have taught you statutes and rules as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do them in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Keep them and do them, for that will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of all the peoples." This is a demonstration. Who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, "Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people." So is there benefit for Israel if they do what God says? Yes. But who is it reflected back towards? Look at verse 7. "For what great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him?" In other words, their good deeds, their obeying God is supposed to reflect back on how great God is, right? And his wisdom and how much better his way is over human ways. And Paul, when he's rebuking the Jewish Christians who kind of had this like superiority, this notion of superiority, he points out that, hey, we had a job, guys, fellow Jews, we had a job and we blew it, right? But he says in Romans 2:17, "But if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know his will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness." In other words, he's critiquing them here, but it's based in that principle that we see in Deuteronomy. And he's like, hey, we understand ourselves as Israel, as people who have received the law, that we are supposed to be a light, lesser lights of the ultimate light to reflect to all the peoples. So that was Israel's role. Much like the sun, moon, and stars, Israel was supposed to reflect God's light, his wisdom and justice as a sign. Remember, the sun, moon, and stars were served as signs, pointing to something greater. Their obedience and following God was supposed to be a sign to the nations of how powerful God is and how good God is, and that he should be followed. All right, how did Israel do? Pop quiz. Really bad. They did very, very bad. And then this is where there's this beautiful poem in Isaiah, and it's called the Servant Song, and it appears like a motif all through these chapters, the servant song. And what is happening in this poem is this longing for this servant of Yahweh, a true Israelite who is going to do what Israel was supposed to but continually failed to do. Someone who will truly be the light of Yahweh to the nations. Because he's lamenting, we don't have anyone like that. We failed as a nation, but God's saying that there's going to be this, he's going to send a servant who's going to do Israel's job for us. Look at verse 5 of Isaiah 42. "Thus says God, the Lord, who created the heavens." Okay, where do you think the poet has been reading from in the scriptures? Probably Genesis 1, right? "And stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it and spirit to those who walk in it. I am the Lord. I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I will give you as a covenant for the people, a light for the nations." Now this is to the servant, this individual. I'm going to take you as a servant, as a light for the nations, to open the eyes that are blind. Ooh, can you think of anyone who did that? An Israelite who did that perfectly. "To bring out the prisoners from the dungeon." Look at Luke 4. All right? "From the prison to those who sit in darkness." Who's the servant of Yahweh? Well, bunch of clues in there if you didn't pay attention. Jesus is the true light. This is where we go right straight into John 1, in verse 1. All right? Notice the language. Where do you think John was reading? Well, first page of his Bible. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the" what? "The light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And then if you fast forward to John 8 and verse 12, it says, "Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world." Is this a new thing? No, this goes back to when God said, let there be light. Well, John says, hey, that was Jesus. And by the way, that word was Jesus. Jesus was the light, and he still is the light. Look at this. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And then he says in chapter 9, verse 5, something very curious. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. As long as I am in the world. Well, who's going to carry on the light when he's no longer in the world? Well, you know, the crowd had that same question, by the way. If you look at chapter 12, it says, so the crowd answered him, we have heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? So Jesus said to them, the light is among you. And again, who is he speaking of? Himself. The light, the light, is among you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light. Why? That you may become sons of light. When Jesus said these things, he departed and hid himself from them. All right, notice that you may become sons of light. All right, who has more importance, the Father or the Son? Who's superior? In a relationship, in a family relationship, who gets the final say? The Father or the Son? The Father. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Jesus says, I can do nothing that the Father does not will. I cannot speak unless the Father tells me to speak. Jesus takes that role. But what does he say about us? We are to be sons of light. What does that mean? Many lights. Are we the light? Are we Jesus? No. Are we children of the light? The Father of lights who dwells in unapproachable light? Yeah, we're little lights. We reflect the ultimate light, right? Any light we have is borrowed, is given to us, just like the sun, the moon, and the stars. We have that role of separating the darkness from the light, from fighting it. Look at Colossians 1:11. Look how Paul puts this. Being strengthened with all power according to whose glorious might? His, right? According to God's glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. If you pay attention reading like light throughout the Bible, you go, wow, this is a lot more present than I thought it was. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness, right? That's where we were. We were in the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, which is another way to say the kingdom of light, because Jesus is the light. All right, what's the point? Why are you yapping about light and darkness in that movie you saw years ago? All right, here's where it all comes together in my mind. Grumbling about darkness does not create light. All right? If you're on a beautiful sunny day and you just look, oh, there's a rain cloud. That's a dark cloud over there. Does that draw your attention to the light, or does that just bring you more into darkness? It just brings you more into darkness. I think in that struggle, right, when we feel like darkness is just surrounding us, I understand that it's easy to just give into that cynicism, right? Or have this kind of fatalistic worldview, like everything's changing, everything's awful. Like, in a lot of ways it kind of is. I understand that. I very much understand that. But it doesn't do any good to complain about it. I think that's exactly what Paul tells us in Philippians 2:14. He says, do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. How do we shine as lights? We don't walk around, right, looking like we were weaned on a pickle and everything's terrible. That's one of the ways we look distinct from the world. That's how we distinguish ourselves as light from the darkness, is we don't just sit around and complain about it. And you know, I'll put it this way. I went spelunking years ago in a bat cave. I'm not Batman, I promise. But we had this thing, we turned all the lights off. We were deep into this cave. That was a kind of darkness that you could feel. I don't know if you've experienced it. Has anyone experienced that? Yeah. Yeah, you can almost taste it, right? It's so palpable, the darkness. I thought I knew what darkness was, not until I was, in the heart of the earth, right? And I know what darkness is now. But one little flicker, right, of light, one phone screen, it seemed like you had supervision. You could see for miles in that cave, just the tiniest hint of light. The darker the world is, the more impactful our light is. Do you understand that? Isn't it hard to be like, to show your phone light if the sun's beaming down on your phone screen? Can you even see? No. But the darker it is, the more impactful our light can be. So the fact that there is so much darkness, guess what? We're not rejoicing that there's darkness, but we can rejoice that we have an opportunity to shine even brighter. That's an opportunity for us. So I can sit around and complain about it, tell everyone how terrible everything is, or I can make a difference. Or I can show everyone how good God is and how good he's been to me. Second, you are not the ultimate light. And this is part rebuke, part, I hope, relieving if you're an anxious person like I am. Just as the stars, sun, and moon were not the ultimate light, we aren't either. To think that like I, Logan, am the only thing that stands between chaos and order and lightness and darkness, that's a burden that's too heavy to bear. To think that like if I mess up, then everything, collapses. No, I'm one little light, right? Matthew 5:14, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works." And who does it get reflected back to? Right? What does my light get reflected back to? The ultimate light. And give glory to your Father who is in heaven. God is light. I'm a son of light. Right? I'm down here. And so I don't have to carry that burden all on my own. I have to do my part, sure, but it's not all up to me. I kind of think of 1 Corinthians 4:5 because we kind of feel like we got to inspect everyone else's light. All right, well, are you shining bright enough? Are you shining bright enough? Kind of inspecting everyone else. Look at 1 Corinthians 4:5. "Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. Then each one will receive his commendation from God." I kind of think about the parable of the wheat and the tares, right? When the enemy sows bad seed, right, with the good seed, and they say, "Lord, shall we tear it up?" And Jesus says, "Nope, not yet. Wait," and then there'll be a sifting process, but it's not your job yet, right? Don't worry about it. I think that should bring relief if you're an anxious person like I am. Like, oh, God's going to take care of it. I have to make sure that my light's shining, right? Which brings us to the third point. You must carry the light. That's not an option to not to. God has transferred us out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. Look at Ephesians 5, verse 8. It says, "For at one time you were darkness." Okay? You were darkness. Not just darkness owns you. You became darkness itself. You became chaos. You became sin. You became death. But now you are light. What's the condition? In the Lord. It's only in the Lord that we have light because God is light. "Walk as children of light," or sons of light. "For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true, and try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. For anything," verse 14, "that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, 'Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.'" In other words, I think as we try to be light in a dark world, and we come across that tension, right, or that futility, it causes some of us to just hang up the torch, right? Or we let Satan it out, right? Because we get tired. And Paul would say, "Awake, get up, wake up. Christ is shining on you. Reflect that light back out into the world." And how do we do that? And I love his language. "Try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord." Man, I'm so thankful he says try to. Because I so imperfectly do that. But what this means is we kind of think of like we got to have this list of every thou shalt and thou shalt not. And it's much more broad than that. Paul says, no, re-examine everything under the light of Christ. Christ has come and shed light on the darkest part of our hearts and the brightest light of God's Spirit and his love and his will for you. And with that light, look at everywhere of your life. Look at the way you dress. Look at what you watch. Look at what you say. Look at what you're doing. Look at the good works. We take everything into that light and examine it. And if it's darkness, it'll be exposed. And I love that because that's a constant process. That's a growing process. Shine that light. Shine it in your heart. Shine it to the world. And finally, your light matters. Because when it is dark, or sometimes when we feel like we're trying, I can't get everyone to behave like I want, right? I can't get my own life the way I wanted to. It just makes you feel like that sheriff, right? All this chaos, and I can't stop it. 1 Corinthians 15:58, it says, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." What labor, Paul? Labor. What's that? Any work. And our Lord tells us that not even a cup of cold water given to a disciple is going to go unrewarded in the world to come. The Lord remembers every small act of service. Every time you let your light shine, as futile as it feels to you now, or has felt to you in the past, or feels like it's futile to do it in the future, God remembers that. And it's not in vain. It will not go unrewarded. 10 times over, right? 100 times over, Jesus says. And to conclude, I want to think about Revelation 21:23, because there's a time that we won't have that responsibility anymore. Because guess what? There's not going to be a sun anymore. John the Revelator talks about the new heavens and the new earth, and he talks about the city that comes down out of heaven from God. And he says the dwelling place of God is with man. We're now in harmony. It's like Eden again. And he says in verse 23, "And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there." We don't have to worry about pushing back the dark anymore, because God's light has filled the new creation. That's a beautiful picture. I want to end with a line, that story I told you about. It's the very end of the movie. It's the very last scene, very last words in it. The sheriff is, again, kind of beaten down by the world, and he's talking to his wife about 2 dreams he had. He said, "I dreamed about my dad," and I'll skip to the second one. He says, the second dream, it was like we was both, by the way, Miss Donna, don't critique me for my grammar. This is literally verbatim what the book says. "We was both back in older times, and I was on horseback going through the mountains of a night, going through this pass in the mountains. It was cold, and there was snow on the ground, and he rode past me and kept on going. Never said nothing. He just rode on past, and he had this blanket wrapped around him, and he had his head down. And when he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire and a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead, and that he was fixing to make a fire out there, and all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there. And then I woke up." That line, that's impacted me, that line, because I can't change the world. I can't save the world. You can't save the world. But you can carry God's flame. You can carry God's fire. And someone will see it. It's going to light the way for someone behind you. So guys, you did not start the fire. I didn't start the fire. We didn't create the light. We can't save the world. But Christ, the true light, has shone into the darkness. And he's overcome it. The darkness has not overcome the light. So we must carry that fire without grumbling, without the vanity of thinking it's all up to me, and not with fear, but with faith that God's going to reward what little effort, what small contribution I make. God sees it, and he will reward it. And we're going to do that until the day where we don't need to carry the fire anymore, because God himself will be the light, and we will be in direct presence with him. Have you been transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light by putting on Christ in baptism? What do you have to gain by rejecting him? You have everything to lose. I mean that. You literally have everything to lose, but you have everything to gain in Christ. He wants to give you his light. He wants to give you his life. Won't you accept that this morning as we stand and sing?